Hey everybody, Dave Whitmer, CEO of Whitmer's Consulting Group. Have another podcast. So we have a special guest today, Sarah, who's the co-founder of OnwardsHR. And so Sarah and I have been talking a lot lately. And I have to tell you, the first time we talked in early spring, Sarah presented something to me that I had never seen before, and I was pretty much blown away. And I'm hoping that you guys will be too. So welcome aboard, Sarah.
Well, thank you so much for having me, David.
Yeah. So I guess what we want to talk about is just so we can frame the conversation a bit, give people some perspective. So tell us a bit about Onwards HR.
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. So Onwards HR is a cloud-based platform that simplifies separations in compliance with corporate policy and employment laws. We basically streamline the process, we promote consistency, and we prioritize transparency. And really our goal and really the results of our platform is a fair and consistent employee exit process that helps build a culture of trust.
And what blew me away was the back end automation of how this is all done. I don't know how many monkeys you got in the back that figured this all out, but it's pretty impressive. So how did you, where did you start in this business world? What's your background?
So I've actually been launching SaaS applications in the HR industry for the last 20 years. So my co-founder and I actually met 20 years ago at the Georgia Tech incubator called the ATDC at a startup called Connecture. So we both actually started there as developers. I ended up moving very quickly into more of a client-facing role, just way too chatty to be a developer for my whole career, and ended up leading the professional services division, and then ultimately moved into a product strategy role. At Connecture, Connecture, just to give you a little bit of background, does sales automation for the health insurance industry. And so when healthcare reform passed, they said, okay, we know this impacts our business, but we don't exactly know how. And they ended up saying, Sarah, okay, what do we do with this? I was one of the very few people that actually read ACA. And in doing so for Connecture, realized that they had two really paths forward. One was for making sure that all of their health insurance companies were compliant, and they had over 50% of the Blues plans as their customers. And then the other one was the state health insurance exchanges, and just saw really that there was a huge opportunity for Connecture to play in that space. So I pitched to our board. I said, you know what, I think we should go after this business. And they said, go for it. So they kind of gave the green light. I started and founded their government division. And after launch, we actually closed 3 state health insurance exchange opportunities, which equated to $18 million for the company. And then Connecture went public at the end of 2014. And then at that point, ADP was just starting their ADP Health Compliance division and was looking for a healthcare reform expert. And there weren't a lot of us out there. So they came knocking, and I basically took an opportunity to exit Connecture and joined ADP as a second leader within the ADP Health Compliance division. I helped them scale that organization from 2 to 250 employees before breaking out on my own and giving Janice a call to come back together and form Onwards.
Okay, so now we're on. Okay, so what was your thought and what was your vision when you put this together? Where did you see it going, and what triggered you to think that there was a need here?
So it's a little bit of an evolution. We did not set out saying we want to build a separation solution to help streamline that process. We actually, because of both Janice and I had a background in benefits, our first launch, it was an open enrollment solution. We were really going to simplify that process and make it easy to stand up, which we did. We actually invested and built a platform that I then took out and took to market, talking to a lot of the contacts that I've had over the years with folks I've met along the way. And one in particular was one of our current customers now, and they loved our benefit solution. However, they had one of those and they said, you know what we're really struggling with right now is severance packages. In particular, they were having challenges making sure they were paying the right people the right amount of severance as part of an exit process. They had recently gone through an M&A situation, and so there was some turnovers, and they just wanted to make sure that they did it right, but they didn't have the tools in place to do so. I said, okay, well, let's talk about it. What all does it entail? And it was very similar to all the different functions you have in open enrollment. There were calculations as part of the severance process. Well, in the insurance world, you're calculating rates. There was a separation package. Well, in the open enrollment world, you have online benefits, you have your application. So we were really able to pivot at that point. We adapted our platform and proposed to them, put a prototype together, because Janice is a genius and an artist, and really mocked up a proposal. They looked at it and they said, we want it. And so they signed. We ended up standing it up for them. And now we've been live with the first iteration since 2019. And really ended up having other conversations with HR folks. And we found unilaterally, even at the largest of organizations, companies today are using email, Word, and Excel to manage the process, or they've patched together some kind of a homegrown solution, but there really isn't another technology on the market. So ever since then, we're all in.
Awesome. And if I'm not mistaken, and I may be, and you feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, there was a recent article in SHRM about that contact and that relationship, was it?
There was. So Jen Bender, the Senior Vice President of People Solutions Shared Services at Change Healthcare, is one of our customers, and really was willing to connect with SHRM and just share her experience about using our platform. And I just couldn't be more thankful that she was, willing to do so. But we've really been able to save them a considerable in their operating costs, which becomes critically important, especially because no company wants to have layoffs. It's usually kind of a financial situation. So cost savings in the process is just critical at that point.
Well, it's a really touchy subject, right? Whenever you have to do layoffs like that, and truthfully, it's just not fun. But when you start getting into different state legislation and different factors, tenure, age, and they're all over the map. So there's a certain liability, right? That you effectively eliminate.
Yes, I mean, one of the biggest challenges that companies have is, the U.S. is actually pretty straightforward because we don't have as many strict statutory requirements around separations. But they do have, very important ones, and that's around equal opportunity, making sure that there isn't any discrimination as part of the exit process, as well as there's a requirement that the DOL, an act called the Workers and Adjustment Notification Act, that requires companies to give 60 days advance notice to any employees that are part of a quote unquote mass layoff. And so, that's just in the US. Abroad, every country has a little bit of a nuance, a little bit something unique. That's a requirement that companies have to comply with as part of any exit process. And that's really what we help them do. So we have what's called we call it our data-driven rules-based document generator. Basically, we basically have a rules engine that archives, or not archives, but inventories all of the requirements of the rules that a organization would want to apply to their separation process, whether that's in an agreement or as part of the separation calculation. And then we're able to assign those rules to a population set, which may be a union, for example, or it can be an entire population that resides in a country. And so being able to organize these compliance rules across the company has been really such a time savers for our customers.
Yeah, and I understand that you're about to launch in 25 different countries, or do I have that number right? Or
So we are really, that is one of our targets for next year. So based on current customers, we will be rolling out across the world, really, helping organizations in many different countries manage this process. And really, it's all about the consistency, right? So it's not only about having, making sure you're applying the right rules, but consistently applying those rules to all of the every employee within that country.
yeah, so what do you see? Like, what are the customers when they interact, right, and come back with feedback? Like, what's the biggest thing that they're seeing that you're helping them with?
So it's really three tiers. So the first thing, the reason they come to us, I mean, there's so many really amazing things that are happening in talent acquisition, like AI and everything else. In the separation process, they just need automation. They just have a problem, right? They have to manage all of these rules and regulations, and they just need to mitigate that first level of risk, right? So they come to us saying, can you just help us here? Help us get organized, help us manage the process, help us be consistent and treat people fairly as part of that exit process. So that's kind of why they come to us. It's really just to manage and minimize the mistakes. The mistakes, as I mentioned before, like our first customer, is a lot around the severance calculations, making, and not just the calculations, but the rules around who gets severance. And so, that's, again, going back to that mitigating risk. So we help them mitigate risk and make sure they apply the state and federal regulations consistently. Second, we help them reduce costs. It is a time-consuming, laborious process and can take anywhere between 20 and even 40 days sometime just to identify everyone who's impacted, justify all those selections. You got the calculations, you got the agreements, and then you have to get everyone to approve the process. It is just very time intensive. And because it's so risky of, like, if I make a mistake, I mean, there are serious consequences. There's all these checks and balances. So we help them streamline that process. And in doing so, it significantly reduces their costs. In large part, those costs are associated with the cost savings is really from payroll costs. So if you have a process that is 40 days, well, you now have people that are, part of that reduction in force on payroll getting benefits for 40 days. If you reduce that timeline down to 8 days or 12 days, you in a sense save the delta in payroll costs.
Right. And plus you also limit the risk. Right,
yes. Which the first,
comes with heavy liability and potential lawsuits and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, the three really cost savers are as we mentioned, minimizing the payroll costs by a shortened timeline. Secondarily is, preventing wrongful termination lawsuits, which a lot of that backlash, or if you don't know of, maybe an former employee went to HR about a manager and now you just included that person as part of a layoff. Well, that company may be facing a retaliation lawsuit. And so it's really important for them to have all the information before they move forward. And then the third really cost saver is around the severance mispayments. I mean, to share a story or a conversation I recently had with a former HR business executive at a Fortune 500 company, he shared that a former employee had accidentally received a $500,000 severance overpayment due to a simple clerical error. And so it was one of those things that it was a sensitive termination. So they didn't go and recover the costs. They also, in admitting the mistake, would have nullified the release agreement. So there was significant risk involved in just the choice of trying to go back and recover that cost. Not even to mention, had that person gone to the news, if they, and went to the press, it would have just tarnished the corporate brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, and then, say, how do you put a hard cost on, if you shrink a timeline from 40 days, down to, I'll take an average of between the 8 and 12 you mentioned, down to 10 days. Well, these folks, they're not being productive at their regular jobs, right? All while they have to reorg, they have to, put out fires, they have to do all sorts of things and change and plan. And, so giving them back an extra 30 days, of proper work hours is a huge benefit to them too, right? Because the last thing you want to do is go into a layoff situation and then have everybody that's involved, sour because, they're not doing their job properly, and they're throwing extra hours and extra time and extra commitment and extra pressure. So that can't be good for the culture either, right?
No, not at all. And actually, as part of a lot of the conversations we had, we do help, promote and a supportive employee exit experience. And we've had a lot of conversations around that. And several of the HR folks that we've talked to said, you know what, I love that you do that as part of your product, your offering. But just so you know, you're making my life easier. Right now, it's really, really hard to manage this process using Word and email and Excel, and those are my only tools available. On top of the fact that it's kind of a dark, difficult situation with some really tough, stressful conversations that are going to have to be had. And so the fact that we can help ease their pains to make them more productive and help them streamline the process and make their lives easier, that's also just a huge validation of the need for our platform.
Yeah, totally. And so where do you see it going, Sarah?
Well, right now we're just we're in growth mode. So it's really kind of exciting because I haven't had a bad conversation yet. Everyone I've spoken to in the HR space that has ever touched this is like, there is such a need for this. And so we are, having conversations with lots of companies and, focused in that right now. So this year, we're in the US and Canada. And as mentioned earlier, the goal for this year is to really go global and help companies across the country, all the different countries across the world, and help them streamline this process.
Oh, perfect. And yeah, so that's awesome. Well, hopefully that works. And how can they get a hold of you if they have questions or want a follow-up call? What's the best way to reach you, Sarah?
So, the best way to reach me is email, good old fashioned email, Sarah with an H at OnwardsHR.com. Or LinkedIn is a great way. Name again is Sarah Rodehorst, CEO and co-founder of OnwardsHR. So very active on LinkedIn and also our website. So OnwardsHR.com is a great place to learn more about our offering.
Perfect. And of course, if anybody's reading this or clicked on it on any place so they could read it, depending where they found it, I'll include contact information in the description. So awesome. Well, good luck, Sarah. I think you're onto something pretty cool, and you must be really excited about that.
Well, thank you so much for having me, David. I really appreciate the opportunity to share our story and our solution, and looking forward to lots of future conversations.
Awesome. All right. Talk soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.